Coming up on Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind is the tools you'll need to approach your divorce more strategically and less reactively.
Hi, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm Corey Shapiro. This is Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind, the podcast and book to help you become more creative and less reactive in your divorce. And don't you want to be less reactive in your divorce? Don't you understand the more reactive you are, the more problems there's going to be, the costlier it's going to be, and the more difficulty you, your children are going to have. So let's think long term. And that's what this podcast is all about, because it's hard to do. We got our owls behind me on my bookcase giving us some wisdom. So let's get into it. The topic today, we're moving on to a new topic. It's a 3-part series on how to find the best divorce attorney for you. And we're going to start today with, do I even need a divorce attorney? Do I even need one? You might not. But before we get into that, if you want all of this information in one resource, check out my book on Amazon, and it might be a good guide to have just to maybe even skim through. You can also listen to it on Audible. All right, so let's start with our quote to get us going. Our quote's from the author, Robert Louis Stevenson. You know, he did Treasure Island. He did Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So what does he have to say about lawyers? Quote is, compromise is the best and cheapest lawyer. What a great author. What a wordsmith. Yes, that is a truth bomb. If you compromise, it's going to save you money. You might not even need attorneys. All right, so the 3 points that I want, or my 3 ideas I want to share, is you may not need an attorney, a divorce attorney, if you're having a clean break, which we'll get into, if you don't have any future financial issues, and if you don't have any kids, maybe pets, because there's pet sharing's a big thing. All right, so you might not need a divorce attorney for that. So let's start with 1. If you have a divorce where you have a clean break, a walk away, all you want is to be single so you can move on and get out of this situation. But you don't need to divide property, you don't have any kids, you don't have any future financial obligations. That is when you might not need a divorce attorney. I mean, you can go for a consultation to make sure, just like you can go for a checkup with a doctor to make sure everything's okay, but you don't need any surgery. You don't need anything more than like, okay, great. Thank you for coming in, and goodbye. That's the walk away. I would say that's about 25% of people who are going through divorce. That's like people who can put together, furniture if there's IKEA instructions, and it's not complicated furniture where you might need a handyman, like putting together like a sit-stand desk with a motor, maybe a treadmill. You're trying to get your steps in, trying to multitask. That might be more complicated than just putting together a simple set of drawers that you might even put in your closet so it could be a little wobbly, if you know what I mean. All right, the second idea in this series is, if you don't have any future financial obligations. I didn't say you didn't have any future financial obligations. I just said you didn't have any future financial obligations. See, that word future is the key word. Because if you can do everything in the present, then maybe it's sort of like a walk away. Let me give you an example here. Let's say your spouse says, I'm going to give you $12,000 up front if you sign off on this divorce. You just sign off on contested divorce. If you don't trust your spouse and think that check's going to bounce, or, Venmo's limit's too low, ask for a bank check, ask for a certified check, and you're good to go. You got that certified check. You sign off on the divorce, then you sort of have a walkaway. There's no future financial obligations. That's pretty good. But let's say your spouse says, I'm going to give you $12,000. I just don't have the money. I'm good for it. I pay you $1,000 a month for a year. That's where you might have problems. Now, even if they memorialize it in a text, in an email, it might not be enforceable unless it follows your jurisdiction's requirements for an enforceable agreement. That's how lawyers make money. I mean, we have to have a job. Also, lawyers created most of the rules, so that's why they make it tricky. Okay, so if you have a future financial obligation like that, then you might need a lawyer help you with agreement. Okay, so that sort of reminds me of the idea that, if you're going hiking, let's say, I go on nature walks. The difference between a hiking and a nature walk is the distance and the difficulty. Nature walks are in the same place. It could be in the forest, but it's just a few miles. Let's say you're going on a nature walk. If you're like me, who's a little anxious, who lives in the city, anytime they go out of the city, they're bringing their water bottle, they're bringing their GPS, they're bringing their map, they're bringing enough food. They want to really understand the situation because they're fearful. I'm fearful of getting lost. So that's the idea here. You're just planning if there's any problems. And that's why you might need a divorce attorney if you have future financial obligations. Now that just makes this more complicated. The third one is, let's say you may need, most likely, if you have children. So now you may have no financial issues or very few financial issues, but what's unresolved here is a parenting plan. And you might say, well, we'll just get along. We'll just wing it. Things change. People move. People meet new people. And you want to memorialize this even in a default plan, most likely, because who knows what's going to happen in the future. Think of Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. My wife loves reality TV, especially on Bravo. She watches Below Deck. And that show is about this semi-professional, maybe amateur crew. There's usually one good person in the crew. And they do these charters for these mega yachts. And the only real professional there is the captain. And that captain is needed. They're expensive. They're experienced. But they know how to run this ship, especially if there's problems. And that is what your attorney would do for you, act as your captain, if you have children, if you have these future financial issues, to help you along the way. All right, so let's summarize. You may not need a divorce attorney if you can do a walk away, if you don't have any future financial obligations, and if you don't have any kids. Maybe pets, you could do a pet agreement. That's where you may not need a divorce attorney. All right, so that was our episode for today. Next episode, we're going to continue on the second part in this series about finding the best divorce attorney for you. And we're going to talk about the difference between finding an attorney who's sort of like an expert for hire. They tell you what you want to hear, versus a trusted advisor, which is more of like a counselor. And which one do you want? I want to thank you. Really want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I know there's a lot going on. And especially if you're new to divorce, it's overwhelming. But you got to take time outside your divorce to work on it, to work on the strategy. We're not working on the tactics here necessarily. We touch on it, but the tactics are going to be with your divorce attorney in your jurisdiction based on your specific facts. Very fact-specific divorces. But you need to understand the strategy. And we're getting to the end of this series in my book. I think this is chapter 8, what we're up to, which is now, like, we went through a lot of the concepts. And if you haven't gone through the concepts, start off in the beginning, with the idea of, first having self-management, first understanding your budget, understanding what divorce attorney tactics are like. And you can realize that even though this is your first time, you have a lot to learn. And I'm trying to just shorten that learning curve. It's taken me over 2 decades to learn this, and it's taken me years to try to make these complicated issues more simple, more actionable. So if you are in one of these situations, unfortunately, I really feel for you and your family if you are, really learn these concepts, and you can re-listen to them and read the book and learn and keep on learning. You'll get better, maybe 1% better each week, and then you too can get a divorce without losing your mind. I'm Corey Shapiro. Thank you for joining us on this episode.
Thank you for tuning in to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. We would love to hear your feedback. Send Corey an email to feedback@gettingdivorced.org. And if you've read his book, please consider leaving an Amazon review. This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.